Hi 10th grade and welcome to our next virtual lesson. Today I'm going to be going over the culminating essay, so that is our final essay for the quarter and the year. I'm going over it now as you finish up formative writing task 2, so that as we read the remainder of the book, you'll know what to look for. So our culminating task question is, what argument does Coates make about the foundation of the American dream and its consequences in Between the World and Me? Delineate and evaluate his argument. Assess whether the evidence is relevant and sufficient. Identify false statements and fallacious reasoning. In your response, use reasoning from both Between the World and Me and other secondary sources that we've read. So this prompt is very similar to formative writing task 2, where we are again continuing to delineate and evaluate arguments. But in this task specifically, it's your task to identify what argument it is that he's making about the foundation of the American dream and its consequences. So there's 2 key vocabulary words that we need to go over in order to understand this task. So the first one is foundation. So you're evaluating his argument about the foundation of the American dream and its consequences. So we need to know what a foundation is. So a foundation is the base or beginning. It's something to be built upon. So if you think about building anything, if you're building a house, you need a solid foundation. So in his argument, he also needs to establish a solid foundation from which the rest can be built upon. So when we think about the foundation, we want to think about the start of the argument, the beginning, or the base. And then if we are evaluating consequences, what consequences were there for the foundation of the dream? Keep in mind that a consequence is simply the result or effect of an action. It's not always negative. It is simply the outcome. So it can be either positive or negative. So not all of the consequences of the American dream have to be negative. You can list positive ones as well. So I've listed some synonyms for both words, so you won't sound so repetitive in your writing. Instead of saying foundation, you could say the basis, the premise, beginning, cornerstone, or essence. For consequence, it is the result, the outcome, the effect, or the reaction. So with these words in mind, I want you to look at this task through the lens of our essential question for the entire unit. And remember that our essential question is, how does race impact the American dream? So Coates' book attempts to answer this question. He really writes this in response to that question. So your task is to evaluate the efficacy of his response to the question. So does he give a good response and make a valid argument? Does it get the results that he intended? Is he convincing? And then when we think about the consequences of this dream, remember that they can be positive or negative, and we'll be brainstorming more consequences in our virtual class. But as an example, a positive consequence for the foundation of this American dream could be the Black community and culture that emerged from it, whereas a negative consequence would be the prison system, which we are going to see this week when we watch the 13th documentary. So going back to the question, we now know how to delineate and evaluate an argument. So first, you're going to state what argument Coates makes about the foundation of the American dream and the consequences that this dream has for people. And then you're going to delineate, so go through his argument point by point and evaluate whether or not it's valid, whether or not the evidence is relevant and sufficient. Does he use enough evidence? Is it convincing? And then are any of the ideas fallacious or simply wrong? So next, I wanted to highlight a piece of text that I think does a great job of showing how Coates establishes the foundation of his argument about the American dream. So remember, for the culminating task, you're identifying the argument that he makes about the foundation of the American dream and its consequences for people in Between the World and Me. So we're going to look at a passage that we've done a close read of before. So this will be our 3rd time looking at this passage. But I think this is a really great quote that shows really the basis or foundation or start of his argument about the American dream. So this is from page 11. And he says, "And for so long I've wanted to escape into the dream, to fold my country over my head like a blanket. But this has never been an option because the dream rests on our backs. the bedding made from our bodies. And knowing this, knowing that the dream persists by warring with the known world, I was sad for the host. I was sad for all those families. I was sad for my country. But above all, in that moment, I was sad for you. So here he really establishes the foundation of the dream by making an allusion that we've discussed several times, which is the historical allusion to slavery. So when he says that, he uses this metaphor of wanting to escape into the dream, but going on to say that he can't because the dream rests on our backs. And when he says that, he means the African American community as a whole. The bedding is made from our bodies, meaning this country only exists because of slavery. And ironically, the dream only exists because of the people who the country tries largely to stop from achieving it. And knowing that the dream persists by warring with the known world. So he understands this constant juxtaposition or this constant struggle of wanting to achieve the dream, but knowing that the dream rests really on the backs of slaves. And he says that this makes him sad for the whole country. So if we're talking about consequences of the dream, obviously he sees this as being a negative consequence. So he was sad for his country, for all of the families. And in that moment, he was sad for his son. So because we can trace, systemic racism all the way back to slavery, and we really are going to see that in the 13th documentary this week. But it really saddens him that this dream that his son is going to strive for rests on the back of his own ancestors. So I think this is a really great quote to kind of show the foundation of his argument about the American dream and its consequences. Obviously, this is not the only argument that he makes, but this really shows the start of it, the basis, the foundation. What Coates is arguing is that the dream rests on the backs of slaves. And that is going to have many different consequences for the Black community and Americans in general. So I hope this was a helpful analysis. Feel free to use this quote or any others that we've gone over in your essay. And I will see you next week.